Spook Who Sat by the Door by Sam Greenlee. Chapter 3. The director of the school reported to the general on the new group. "General, I'm afraid that there is at least one who might stick it. I thought you told me only 2 weeks ago that there was hardly a chance that any of that group would last." "That's correct, General. Even with the faces on paper before me as I made the report, I somehow forgot that the man existed. He has a way of fading into the background. You can't remember his face, or what he looks like, or what he has said, even minutes after you have spoken to him. But the records speak for themselves. He leads the class in everything, and his marks are above average, although not by much, for our regular classes." "Who is the man?" "His name is Freeman, sir." "Is that the one who had the altercation with Calhoun?" "Yes, sir. And Sue reports that he could have killed Calhoun. Sue thinks him one of the finest natural judoists of his experiences. But Calhoun is rated one of the best men we have in hand-to-hand combat." "That's right, General. But in all honesty to Calhoun, this man has had several years' experience as a judoist. He has fought in the Midwest regional championships for the last 3 years, qualifying for the national finals, but refusing the trip because of work commitments. Our physical instructor considers him one of the finest natural athletes he has ever seen." "True, they do make good athletes. Great animal grace and reflexes. I'm disappointed, however, in Calhoun. Should have never lost his head, challenged the man. Sue indicates that there was no provocation. He's just too dedicated to the agency. Can't stand the idea of standards being lowered. Can't say that I disagree with him. Well, he has a chance to prove himself in Yemen." The general picked up some papers from his desk in dismissal. When the director of the school had almost reached the door, the general lifted his head. "This man, Freeman, if he survives this group, is to go into the incoming class. He might do well among his own people, but competing with whites might be another cup of tea. He is not to be treated unfairly, but he is not to be given any advantage either." The general motioned the director back to the chair. "What kind of man would you say he is?" "Well, slow-witted, a plotter. He studies 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. Only in athletics does he seem to do things naturally. Physically, he could be expected to react instantly and efficiently, but in a mental crisis, I don't know." "I thought as much. Then there is no question of his going into the field. Even if he does survive the group, we cannot subject the lives of other agents into the field of his deficiencies. We will find something for him here in headquarters. Thank you. That will be all. Keep me posted on this group." 2 weeks before the scheduled ending of the training, Freeman was alone. He watched the last of the group leave. No one bothered to say goodbye. Freeman had no friends among them, and his continued presence in the camp was an insult. He settled himself in front of the television set and pressed the remote control button and watched the white fantasy world in full color. Freeman finished the course and was congratulated in a small ceremony in the director's office. There was to be 3 weeks before the new group arrived, and he elected to remain in the camp, except for a few days' leave. He drove to an all-Negro housing development just across the Anacostia River and applied to a 1-bedroom apartment. He then drove to New York and checked into the Hotel Teresa in Harlem. He made the rounds of the Harlem bars the first evening, before heading downtown to the jazz joints. His Robert Hoss suit and 2-pointing shoes were in the hotel closet, his gold-edged tooth cap in a plastic container in the bathroom, and a plain one replacing it. He wore black-rimmed glasses of plain glass, cordovan bluchers, a button-down shirt of English Oxford, and a dark sharkskin sheet from J. Press. He saw Thelonious Monk at the 5 Spot, the band with Johnny Griffin, Charlie Mingus at the Village Gate. He saw 3-Penny Opera in the Village and 5-Finger Exercise, The Night of the Iguana, and I Can Get It For You Wholesale on Broadway. He visited the newly opened Guggenheim and decided that Wright had goofed, but he enjoyed the Kandinsky's. He visited the galleries on 57th Street and the Museum of Modern Art. His second night, he found a 6-foot compatible whore who knew the night clerk at his hotel. He tipped the night clerk and the bellboy on duty, and each night after that, he would meet her in the bar between 2 and 3, and they would spend the night in his hotel room. He purchased 16 books, but deferred delivery until further notice. The CIA Freeman would not have read those books. Freeman left his suit, shoes, shirt, tie, and tooth cap in a bag, with instructions that they be delivered to the storage company that stored the rest of his clothing, records, books, and paintings that had no business in his new existence. He would establish a New York base later. He had pondered the danger of leading a double life and decided that the strain of squaredom would have to be eased somehow from time to time. The next few days in New York, doing the simple things he had done, had convinced him more than ever that this was important. He might be CIA time in Washington, but for a few days elsewhere, he would have to become Freeman again. He did not think that, even if he ran into his CIA colleagues in New York, identification would be a danger. Niggas all look alike to whites anyway, and no one would connect the New York Freeman with the Freeman who would pioneer integration in one of the most powerful governmental institutions in the United States. He left early Sunday morning, the top of the car down. He put the Morgan onto the New Jersey Turnpike and headed south for the nation's capital. The Morgan would have to go, he decided. It did not fit his painstakingly creative image. He was sorry about that as he listened to the exhaust note over the roar of the wind in the car radio. But a Ford or a Chevrolet would be better, perhaps even an Oldsmobile or a Buick. He would be expected to own a car a bit outside his means, a bit more expensive and flashy than those of his peers at the agency. It was not difficult to conform to the image whites desired, since they did most of the work. They saw in most Negroes exactly what they most wanted to see. One need only impressionistically support the stereotype. Whites were fools, and one had constantly to fight in order not to underestimate their power and danger, because a powerful and dangerous fool is not to be underestimated. Add the elements of hypocrisy and fear, and one had an extremely volatile combination. It was a combination that could easily blow the country, even the world, apart. In the army, Freeman had learned to respect, but not fear, the potential danger of explosives. Rather, he had learned how to use them. He did not, as did the African diplomats, have difficulty with lunch on Highway 1 because he did not bother to try and get a meal in the greasy spoons and truck spots that dotted the highway, like cancerous growths of chrome and neon. He stopped along the highway and ate a lunch he had packed the night before from a delicatessen. A pre-mixed martini over the rocks from a thermos, a cold chicken with potato salad, a mixed salad with oil and vinegar dressing, and a small bottle of Chablis, which had chilled in the cracked ice of the cooler. Finished, he discarded the ice, repacked the container, and lay back on the army blanket he had spread under a tree and slept for an hour. He reached Washington just ahead of the incoming weekend traffic and was in camp in time to shower and watch Ed Sullivan on television after a light dinner in the camp dining room. An agent, as Freeman had anticipated, had checked his movements in New York, checking routinely at the hotel and questioning the whore with whom Freeman had slept. They would not find much, since Freeman knew that the people with whom he had talked would either have seen nothing out of the ordinary in either his dress or behavior. Besides, Harlem Negroes, particularly hotel employees and prostitutes, seldom tell white men very much, especially those who look and act like cops, regardless of what they claim to be. Free of classes, Freeman increased his personal study and was able to spend time each day working with Sue on the mat. He added karate to his repertoire of judo and jiu-jitsu, and spent time as well on the range, firing pistols, rifles, and shotguns, as well as his more favored automatic weapons. Freeman spent each weekend in Washington and became convinced that it is one of the squarest towns in the world. Within walking distance of the immaculate white neoclassical center lies some of the worst ghetto slums in the United States. The bigots on Capitol Hill need look no further than a few hundred yards to convince themselves of the inherent inferiority of Negroes, and, controlling the capital like a colonial fiefdom, they can ensure that things will not change racially. He found a whore on U Street and would spend time with her each weekend, in a bed in a hotel in the ghetto. She was questioned as well. "Look, honey, what kind of cop you say you were?" "I'm not a police officer." "You look like a cop to me, baby. How come you asking me stuff about this cat? He in trouble? He a nice John. What make you think I'm going to tell you anything?" "I'm not a policeman, but I do have police friends." "Like that, huh? I wondered when you start leaning on me. You old fays never know different, no matter how you look. And you college cats with the smiles and pink baby faces the worst. Okay, what you want to know?" He slipped her a 20. She picked it up from the table, never taking her eyes off his face. "Have you ever known him to take dope? Marijuana? Heroin?" "Nah, he don't even smoke much. After he eats, after we done turned the trick, maybe 3 or 4 cigarettes all the time we together. He ain't no junkie, baby. Does he have a tendency to boast, brag? Him? Nah, he don't talk about himself at all. I thought he was a baseball player, even football, although he a bit small for that. But he could be. He ain't nothing but muscle and prick. If he got any fat on him, I ain't find it. Does he gamble? Nah. One night I took him up a place. Cat owed me some bread and I had to collect. Little poker, little craps. He just watch and when we through, we leave. Tell you something about that man though. People don't give him no shit. He move quiet, don't say nothing. But I seen some bad cats move around him. This cat owed me this bread. He don't want to pay it. I don't tell him nothing about, what you say his name? Freeman? I don't say nothing about him being my man. I just took him there before we make it to the hotel, and maybe he wants some action. I get a cut. The cat owed me start to get a little off the wall about the bread. Then he look at Freeman. He just standing there, watching the crack game, quiet. Ain't bothering nobody. But this cat owes me the bread, look at him, and then look at me, and baby, he give me the bread. And that cat one of the baddest men in D.C. He may tour Freeman, but he don't want no part of him. He ain't my man and it wasn't his scene. But I thought about it, and if I had trouble that night, he'd be in it. And he ain't romantic about chicks on the block. Never comes on like a social worker. How a nice girl like you gained this shit? Let me take you out of it, baby. None of that shit. I'm a whore and he knows it, but he treats me like a queen. I think he putting me on for a long time and then I get to like it. He can put me on as long as he wants. I dig the way he treats me. I'm a whore. He knows it. I know it. But when I'm with him, he makes me feel like a queen. What about his sexual habits? Anything, well, unusual? She looked at him through narrowed eyes. So that's your scene? Well, baby, 20 bills ain't enough for no freaks. Come again. Little more bread, dig? I know some chicks don't deal in nothing but freakish tricks, but it ain't my scene. And don't start no shit about the man. I ain't on junk, and I can always get my hat and make it to Baltimore, dig? He gave her another 20, blushed furiously, and damned the woman for sensing what no one else knew, that he enjoyed this part of the job, to his shame. Nothing fancy, little straight up and down mostly. Blowjobs ain't his scene. He don't mind a little head now and then, but before the deal goes down, he want to make it straight. No way out positions or jazz whips and wet towels. No gimmicks. He just like to screw, baby. Now don't be disappointed. Now I can tell you about some real freaks. I got a trick. White boy like you. Come down here once a week just to listen. Get his cookies every time. You want to hear some scenes, honey? Or maybe you want to get a show together. Straight, gay, or both. Anything you want, baby. They were sitting in the back booth of a long, narrow, and very dark bar on U Street. She stroked his thigh and confirmed his excitement. This was the easiest trick she had in a week. She wondered how much she could milk him for. Would you say that he might have homosexual tendencies? She threw her pretty black head back and laughed. Him? Man, you wasting your time there. You wouldn't make that scene for nothing. If you got a thing for him, look someplace else. Shit, I ought to know what I'm talking about. I make it that way myself, and it takes one to know one. Anybody could turn me straight. It could be him. I mean, he don't need no fake scenes, and he just want a good professional job. But sometimes he really turns me on, and I had no thing for a man in years. No, baby, he ain't gay. But if that's your scene, I know somebody you might dig. She continued to stroke his thigh. Or, baby, I could do things for you. She leaned over, whispering in his ear, and told him in detail what she could do. He backed into the corner of the booth, but continued to listen. Suddenly, he gripped her thigh with one hand and groaned. She moved away, looked at him in contempt, and then she lit a cigarette. He lay back against the corner of the booth until the color returned to his face, a thin film of perspiration on it. She crossed her legs and moved her foot in time to Sonny Stitt on the jukebox. She liked this joint. It had good sounds here. He sat up and wiped his face with a handkerchief, looking around nervously. No one was paying the slightest attention to the booth. She motioned toward the back of the bar. The John back there. He started to slide across the bench of the booth. You forgetting something, honey? She held out her hand. He reached quickly into his pocket and stuffed crumpled bills into her hand. She looked at him, nodded, and moved from the booth to let him pass. She smoothed her red dress, thinking that his grip on her thigh might leave a bruise. She walked to the bar and ordered a drink, fixed her hair in the mirror, and straightened her red dress on her shoulders. She had never worn red before. She had been told all her life that she could not because she was too black, but Freeman had told her that she should wear it because she was the Dahomey Queen. She had gone to the library to find out what he meant because he wouldn't explain, and asked for the book he had written down for her. She had found out that he was talking about Africa, and at first had been angry. But there was the picture of a woman in the book that looked enough like herself to startle her. Hair kinky and short cropped, with big earrings in her ears. She had taken the book out of the library and painfully read it in its entirety. Then she bought a red dress, and later, several others when she found that Trix liked it, but mostly because Freeman liked her in red and said so. She wore big round and oval earrings like the queen in the picture, but she could not bring herself to wear her hair short and kinky. But sometimes she would look at the picture and see herself there, and for the first time in her life, she began to think that she might be beautiful, as he said. She returned to the booth and sipped her new drink. The trick had returned from the John, all police-like and white man strong. He thanked her for her information and cautioned her not to say anything to Freeman. He could not look her in the eye. She blew smoke into his face, and he left. She would need no more tricks that night, and she had done better than for a full weekend with the Patty boy. She walked to the phone booth and called her chick. "Honey, got a scene working. Won't be able to make it tonight. Big bread. See you tomorrow, huh?" "Of course I miss you. Be cool, baby. Mama will make it up tomorrow. Bye now." She walked out into U Street and took a cab to a small efficiency apartment that she kept for herself. Even her woman did not know of its existence, and she used it when she wanted to be alone. She wanted to be alone tonight and to think about Freeman. She might invite him to her apartment to come in weekend instead of making their usual hotel routine. Men were not her scene, she knew, but she liked that man. She knew soon after she entered the apartment that she would invite him there. End of chapter 3.